Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an absolute high-stakes historical thriller to figure out exactly how England permanently shattered the divine right of kings. We're going to see how the Glorious Revolution of 1688 didn't just fuel the rise of the British Empire, but fundamentally changed the entire trajectory of global governance. But right off the bat, we run into this massive historical contradiction. I mean, think about this. How on earth does an invasion force of 15,000 heavily armed troops result in an event that history literally calls a bloodless revolution? Well, to understand that paradox, we have to look at the terrifying ticking time bomb sitting on the English throne at the time, and that was King James II. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture it's 1685. James II ascends the throne, and he's walking into a deeply Protestant nation that is still carrying some serious trauma from the English Civil War. They are highly suspicious of any royal overreach. Now, James is an avowed Catholic, and he exacerbates these fears almost instantly. He builds a permanent, peacetime standing army of 30,000 men, and he camps them right outside London. To the Protestant gentry, this didn't look like domestic security. It looked exactly like the beginnings of a modern dictatorship. And it actually gets worse, because James believed wholeheartedly in the divine right of kings. He genuinely felt he answered only to God, not to the people, and definitely not to Parliament. So he aggressively starts using this tool called royal dispensing power. Basically, he completely bypasses Parliament, using unilateral royal decrees to suspend anti-Catholic laws. By doing this, he systematically starts stuffing the highest echelons of the English military and royal bureaucracy with Catholic officers. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth did the Protestant majority put up with this? Well, early on, they assumed they could just wait him out. His expected successor was his adult daughter, Mary, who was Protestant. But that entire calculation went completely out the window in June of 1688 when the Queen gave birth to a healthy son. Suddenly, England wasn't just dealing with one Catholic king anymore. They were staring down the barrel of a permanent, multi-generational Catholic dynasty, and total panic set in. Seeing their window of opportunity closing rapidly, literally shutting in their faces, a clandestine group of 7 prominent English politicians decided to take some drastic action. Later dubbed the Immortal Seven, they penned a highly treasonous letter. Let's be clear. If this letter had been intercepted, every single one of them would have been executed for high treason. They managed to smuggle this letter across the North Sea to William of Orange. Now, William was the formidable military leader of the Dutch Republic, and, crucially here, he was married to James's Protestant daughter, Mary. The Immortal Seven essentially beg him to mount a military intervention, and they promise that a massive portion of the English population will rise up and back him the second his boots hit English soil. William accepts the invitation, but here's the thing. His motivations were completely different from the English politicians who invited him. The English just wanted to stop James II, but William's motives were highly pragmatic and completely geopolitical. The Dutch Republic was locked in this bitter, existential struggle against the supreme superpower of Europe at the time, Louis XIV's Catholic France. William realizes that if he can just take over England, he can command its vast resources, its powerful navy, and basically weaponize Great Britain to contain French expansion. So, William mobilizes. On November 5th, 1688, aided by what history calls a Protestant wind, which was just a massive weather front that conveniently trapped the English fleet in their ports, William lands in Devon, and he brings an armada of 15,000 troops. Just to put that into perspective for a second, this was a staggering invasion force. It was significantly larger than the legendary Spanish Armada. Now, as William marches toward London, you'd probably expect a massive, bloody clash of armies, right? Instead, James's regime completely collapses from the inside out through systematic desertion. Seeing which way the political wind is blowing, James's top military commanders, including Lord John Churchill, they just abandon the king and ride out to join William. Even James's younger daughter, Princess Anne, flees the palace to join the opposition. Stricken by sheer panic and suffering from these severe, persistent nosebleeds, James completely unravels. Terrified he's going to suffer the exact same fate as his executed father, Charles I, he throws the Great Seal of the realm into the River Thames and bolts for exile in France. And this brings us to the absolute genius of how Parliament handled this incredibly messy situation. They used his cowardly flight to France as a very convenient legal fiction. They officially declare that by running away, James had committed an abdication of the throne. This was a brilliant political maneuver because it allowed them to entirely bypass the chaos and the potential bloodshed of actually putting a reigning monarch on trial.
Because they avoided that trial, what happens next is basically a complete architectural rewrite of British governance. The nation shifts practically overnight from a Stuart monarchy, where sovereignty is based on this divine right answering only to God, straight into a parliamentary settlement, where the monarch rules solely through the consent of Parliament. The Crown lost its ability to independently levy taxes. Parliament just outright seized control over the power of the purse. And those royal courts that could once imprison dissidents without a trial, they were replaced by habeas corpus, permanently banning cruel punishments.
This new regime also finally brought some much-needed order to the military mandate. Remember that terrifying 30,000-man army James II built? Well, under this new settlement, peacetime standing armies went from being a terrifying tool of domestic oppression to being explicitly illegal without annual parliamentary approval. The king simply couldn't hold a permanent military threat over his own citizens' heads anymore. All of these sweeping changes get formalized in early 1689. Parliament officially offers the crown to William and Mary as co-rulers. But there was one massive, absolutely non-negotiable catch. Before they could take the throne, they had to formally accept the English Bill of Rights. This is the document that permanently locked the new constitutional architecture into place. It guaranteed free parliamentary elections, established absolute freedom of speech within legislative chambers, and, reflecting the very deep anxieties of that specific era, officially banned any Catholic from ever ascending the British throne. Which brings us to a really vital question to close this out. The events of 1688 undeniably marked the birth of modern British capitalism and parliamentary democracy. But while it's famously called the Glorious Revolution because it was largely bloodless inside the borders of England, we absolutely cannot ignore its wider legacy. This exact same regime change sparked intense, incredibly bloody conflicts in Ireland and Scotland, known as the Jacobite Wars, where pro-Stuart loyalists resisted for decades. So as you reflect on this massive historical shift from absolute power to constitutional law, I'll leave you with this to chew on. Was the foundation of modern parliamentary democracy truly born from a bloodless pivot, or was the ultimate price simply paid in blood just across the borders? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.